There are men who own the city, and there are men the city fears. Kenji Tanaka was both. When he walked into a room, the air didn't just shift, it knelt. Sound died in throats, laughter became a memory, and the clinking of fine crystal and silver fell silent, as if the objects themselves knew to show reverence. Tonight, he wore a traditional kimono of beige silk, the fabric so fine it seemed to float around his frame, a whisper of old power in a world of sharp suits and loud money. He moved with a liquid grace that belied the coiled stillness within him, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm or a strike. His face was a mask of placid control, but his eyes, dark and ancient, missed nothing. They swept over the opulent decor of the Gilded Cage, a restaurant that prided itself on exclusivity, a place where fortunes were made and broken over seared scallops and vintage wine. It was his birthday. 40 years of a life lived in shadows and silence, marked by brutal efficiency and a profound, hollowing loneliness. He hadn't wanted a celebration. He had simply wanted a quiet table, a good meal, and the illusion of normalcy for a single night. An illusion he was about to discover that was not for sale, not even for a man like him. From across the room, Chloe watched him enter. She felt the change in atmospheric pressure, like a drop in her own blood sugar. Her feet ached. It was the end of a 10-hour shift, and every nerve was frayed with the familiar anxieties of a single mother swimming against the current. Rent was due. Her son, Sam, needed new shoes. The tips tonight were mediocre. Every smile she pasted on, every polite nod, was a transaction aimed at survival. Her uniform, a crisp white shirt and a smart red vest, felt like a costume for a part she was growing too weary to play. She was 28, but some nights she felt 100. She saw the manager, Mr. Davies, spot the man in the kimono, and a familiar, ugly tightening began in her stomach. Davies was a man who measured worth in brand names and skin tones, a petty tyrant of his small, gilded kingdom. His smile was a weapon, and his disdain was a verdict. Chloe watched him approach the silent, waiting figure of Kenji Tanaka, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this would not end well. She just didn't know that the ending would be hers. Mr. Davies glided across the marble floor, his posture reeking of manufactured importance. He stopped a careful 5 feet from Kenji, a distance that was meant to be respectful but was, in its calculation, an insult. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth but lacking any warmth. It was the voice he used for tourists he deemed unworthy or locals who had wandered in by mistake. "I'm afraid we're fully booked this evening. Reservations are required. You see, it was a lie, and a lazy one at that." Chloe knew for a fact that table 12, a quiet corner booth, was open. It was always held for last-minute VIPs, a silent testament to the restaurant's hierarchy. Kenji's gaze didn't flicker. He didn't gesture to the empty table, nor did he raise his voice. He simply stood there, his presence a silent question. "I see," he said, his voice a low, calm timbre that carried more weight than Davies's practiced pronouncements. His stillness was unnerving. It invited a flurry of nervous energy from the other man. "Perhaps another time," Davies continued, already turning away, dismissing the man as if he were a piece of lint to be brushed from a lapel. "If you call ahead," the humiliation was public, deliberate, and sharp. It wasn't just a refusal of service. It was a denial of personhood. Every diner who had fallen silent now watched, their eyes a mixture of curiosity and cruel satisfaction. They were inside. He was out. The system worked. Chloe felt a hot flush of anger creep up her neck. She had seen Davies do this before a dozen times to a dozen different people for a dozen different, unspoken reasons. He enjoyed it. It was a flexing of his pathetic power. She looked at Kenji, at the profound isolation that seemed to cling to him like the silk of his kimono, and for the first time, she didn't see a fearsome man who made the air crackle. She saw a man alone on his birthday, being told he wasn't welcome. It was a feeling she understood deep in her bones, the sting of being judged and found wanting by a world that didn't care to look closer. Her shift was over. Her feet were screaming. Getting involved was stupid, reckless, and guaranteed to get her in trouble. But something inside her, a quiet, defiant spark she thought had been extinguished by exhaustion, refused to let it go. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of her chest. This was insane. She should just clock out, go home, and wrap her arms around her son, the only part of her world that made any sense. She should forget the silent man and his quiet dignity, forget the manager's smug, hateful face. But she couldn't. The image of his solitude was burned into her mind. In the kitchen, the pastry chef had been experimenting with new cupcakes for the dessert menu. There was one left on the cooling rack, a small, perfect swirl of chocolate frosting on a dark, rich base, with a single candied violet on top. It was a tiny thing, an afterthought. But right now, it felt like the only weapon she had against the casual cruelty of the world. Without thinking, without allowing her rational mind to list the 1,000 reasons why this was a terrible idea, she placed the cupcake on a small, clean saucer. She found a single, slender birthday candle and, her hands trembling slightly, tucked it into the frosting. She didn't have a match, but that didn't matter. It was the gesture, not the flame. She walked out of the kitchen, the small saucer held carefully in her hands. Mr. Davies was schmoozing with a wealthy couple at a nearby table, his back to the entrance. Kenji hadn't left yet. He was standing by the large glass doors, looking out at the rain that had begun to slick the city's streets with silver and black. He was about to step out into the night, to be swallowed by the city that both feared and revered him, taking his loneliness with him. "Sir?" Her voice was barely a whisper, so quiet she was afraid the ambient noise of the restaurant had consumed it. But he heard. He turned his head slowly, his dark eyes finding hers. The intensity in his gaze made her falter, but she held her ground, taking the final few steps toward him. She held out the saucer. I heard the host say it was your birthday," she lied softly. "We don't have a table, and I'm so sorry for that. But no one should be turned away on their birthday without something." He looked down at the cupcake, at the Johnny, unlit candle, and then back up at her face. He saw the flush on her dark skin, the genuine empathy in her brown eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. He saw a kindness so pure and unexpected it felt like a foreign language he had once known but long since forgotten. He didn't speak for a long moment. The world seemed to have shrunk to the space between them, a pocket of silence in the humming restaurant. Chloe's breath hitched, her courage failing her. She felt foolish, a child offering a dandelion to a king. She was about to apologize, to retreat, when he reached out. His fingers, long and elegant, brushed against hers as he took the saucer. The touch was electric, a brief, warm shock that ran up her arm. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but they held the weight of a lifetime of solitude. His eyes were locked on hers, and in them, she saw a flicker of something she couldn't name, vulnerability, surprise, a deep, aching gratitude. It was a look that said he wasn't just being seen, he was being acknowledged as human. And then the moment shattered. "Chloe, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Mr. Davies' voice was a whip crack, sharp and venomous. He had seen her. He strode toward them, his face a mask of incandescent rage. "You are fraternizing with a man I just asked to leave. You are giving away restaurant property. What is wrong with you?" Chloe flinched, instinctively taking a step back. "I am sorry, Mr. Davies. I just thought—" "I don't pay you to think," he snarled, his voice low and menacing so as not to cause a scene, which only made it more terrifying. He turned his glare on Kenji, who was still holding the cupcake, his expression unreadable. "And you?" I told you to leave. Kenji's gaze shifted from Chloe to the manager. The air grew cold, heavy. He didn't say a word, yet the threat was palpable. But Davies, high on his own power, was blind to it. He turned back to Chloe, his face twisted with spite. "You're fired," he hissed, the words hitting her like a slap. "Clock out. Get your things. You're done here. I want you out of my restaurant now." The world tilted on its axis. Fired. The word echoed in the sudden, roaring silence of her mind.
Rent. Cement shoes.
Groceries. The fragile structure of her life, held together with sleepless nights and aching feet, crumbled into dust. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and shameful. She looked from Davies's triumphant sneer to Kenji's stony face, and all she could feel was a profound, crushing despair. It was over. Her small act of kindness had cost her everything. Chloe felt the floor drop out from under her. She nodded numbly, the fight draining out of her in a single, devastating wave. She couldn't even form a protest. The shock was too absolute. She turned, her movements stiff and robotic, and walked toward the staff locker room, the hushed whispers of the nearby diners following her like a shroud. She could feel Kenji's eyes on her back, a silent, heavy pressure, but she didn't dare look at him. She was too ashamed, too broken. In the cramped, gray locker room, the reality began to set in. The panic was a physical thing, a cold fist clenching in her gut. How was she going to tell Sam? How was she going to make rent? The city was expensive, and waitress jobs with decent tips were hard to come by. Davies would blacklist her. She knew his type. He would make sure she didn't work in another high-end restaurant in this town again. She changed out of her uniform, the red vest feeling like a brand of failure, and pulled on her thin jacket. Her hands were shaking as she gathered her purse and the small, worn photo of Sam she kept tucked inside her locker door. Through the swinging kitchen doors, she could hear the sounds of the restaurant returning to normal, the clatter and chatter resuming as if nothing had happened. Her humiliation was just a momentary diversion, a bit of dinner theater for the wealthy. As she walked out the back service entrance into the rain-slicked alley, a sleek black car, the kind that was silent even when it was running, pulled up to the curb. Chloe barely noticed it, her mind a whirlwind of fear. She pulled her jacket tighter and started walking toward the bus stop, the cold rain beginning to soak her hair. The car door opened. "Miss," a voice called out. It was Kenji. He stood by the open door of the car, holding a black umbrella, the cupcake still cradled carefully in his other hand. He hadn't eaten it. He had watched her get fired. He had watched her walk away. And he had followed. Chloe stopped, her heart doing a painful lurch. She didn't know what he wanted. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the rain plastering strands of hair to her cheeks. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." He took a step toward her, holding the umbrella over her head. The sudden cessation of rain against her skin was a small, startling relief. "The trouble was not of your making," he said, his voice calm and even. "You showed me a kindness I did not expect. It will not be the cause of your ruin." He gestured to the open car door. "Please, allow me to take you home." The interior of the car was a world away from the grimy, rain-soaked alley. It was silent, smelled of clean leather and something faintly spicy, like sandalwood. Chloe sat stiffly on the seat, her wet jacket a stark contrast to the immaculate luxury surrounding her. Kenji sat beside her, a portrait of quiet control. He gave the driver her address in a low voice, and the car pulled away from the curb as smoothly as a sigh. The silence was thick with unspoken questions. Chloe twisted the strap of her purse in her lap, her mind still reeling. What was happening? Why was this man, this powerful, intimidating stranger, giving her a ride home? Was this pity or something else? Kenji seemed to sense her turmoil. He turned to her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Davies will no longer be the manager of that establishment," he said simply. Chloe stared at him.
What?
What do you mean? I mean, Kenji clarified, his gaze steady, that as of 10 minutes ago, I concluded the purchase of the building. The restaurant and all its assets are now mine. Mr. Davies has been relieved of his duties. Permanently, Chloe's mouth fell open. It didn't seem possible. The speed, the finality of it. It was a power move so far beyond her comprehension that it felt like something out of a movie. She thought of Davies' smug face, his petty cruelty, and a dizzying sense of whiplash washed over her. He had fired her, and in the time it took her to walk to the alley, he had lost his entire kingdom. You bought the restaurant? Because he was rude to you? Because he fired me. Kenji considered this for a moment. He was not rude, he corrected gently. He was cruel. There is a difference. He broke a rule of hospitality, which my culture takes very seriously. And he punished you for upholding it. Such an imbalance requires correction. He looked down at the cupcake he was still holding, its perfect swirl of frosting now slightly melted from the warmth of his hand. This was an honorable gesture. It deserved an honorable response. Chloe didn't know what to say. The entire night felt surreal, a fever dream of humiliation and rescue. The man beside her had casually rearranged her world, dispensing justice with the quiet efficiency of a god. But what did that mean for her? When the car pulled up outside her modest apartment building, the engine a near silent hum, Chloe felt a fresh wave of anxiety. This was her life, her reality. A third-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that was safe enough, but a universe away from the gilded cage he had just purchased. He was going to see the cracked pavement, the flickering fluorescent light in the lobby. He was going to see how she really lived, and the spell of the surreal night would break. She turned to thank him, to end this strange encounter, but he was already getting out of the car, his driver opening the door for him with a respectful bow. He opened her door and once again held the umbrella for her. I will see you to your door, he stated. It was not a question. The walk up the 3 flights of stairs was quiet, the only sound their footsteps on the worn linoleum. Chloe was acutely aware of his presence behind her, a steady, protective shadow. He didn't seem to notice the peeling paint or the faint smell of cooking from other apartments. His focus was entirely on her. At her door, she fumbled for her keys, her fingers clumsy with nerves. Thank you, she said again, her voice small. For the ride. For everything, he simply nodded. Tomorrow at noon, he said, a car will be here to pick you up. We will discuss your future. My future? You are a person of integrity, Chloe, he said, using her name for the first time. It sounded different in his low, resonant voice, as if it had a weight she'd never known. Such people are rare. I have a position for you. If you will accept it. Before she could respond, he held out the small saucer with the cupcake. You should have this. Your son might enjoy it, he had heard her mention Sam. He had listened. The thought sent a strange warmth through her. She took the saucer, their fingers brushing again. This time, the spark lingered. He gave her a slight, formal bow and turned, descending the stairs as silently as he had come. Chloe stood there, her key in the lock, watching until he was gone. She went inside, locking the door behind her, her back sliding down against it until she was sitting on the floor. She looked at the little cupcake, a ridiculous, wonderful, life-altering thing, and for the first time all night, she let herself cry. Not tears of despair, but tears of a strange, terrifying, and overwhelming relief. The next day, the black car arrived at precisely noon. Chloe had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night in a dizzying loop. She had explained to a sleepy Sam that she had the day off, her voice betraying none of the seismic shifts that had occurred in her life. She dressed carefully, choosing her nicest pair of jeans and a simple blouse, feeling hopelessly out of her depth. The car took her not to the restaurant, but to a sleek, impossibly tall skyscraper downtown that seemed to pierce the clouds. The elevator ride was silent and swift, ending at a penthouse suite that was less of an office and more of a sky palace. The view was breathtaking, the entire city sprawling below them like a map. Kenji was waiting for her, dressed in a simple dark sweater and trousers, the severe formality of the kimono gone. He looked younger, more approachable, but the aura of quiet power remained. He offered her tea, pouring it himself with a steady, practiced grace. "I would like you to manage the restaurant," he said, without preamble. Chloe nearly choked on her tea. "Manage?
Me?
I'm a waitress. I don't have any experience." "You have experience in what matters," he interrupted gently. "You understand decency. You understand hospitality. The logistics can be learned. Integrity cannot. The restaurant will be closed for 1 week for rebranding. You will have full authority over staffing, the menu, the atmosphere. You will make it a place of welcome, not exclusion. Your salary will be more than sufficient to ensure you and your son are secure." The offer was staggering. It was a lifeline, a golden rope thrown down from a place she didn't even know existed. It was also terrifying. It tied her to him, to his world, which she instinctively knew was filled with shadows she couldn't comprehend. "Why?" she asked, the word a whisper. "Why are you doing this for me?" He looked out the vast window at the city below. "For many years, my life has been about transactions. Power, fear, loyalty, all of it a form of currency. Last night, you offered something with no expectation of return. It was a novelty." He turned back to her, his gaze direct and searching. "I find myself wishing to be in the presence of such a novelty more often," and so she accepted. The week that followed was a blur. Chloe threw herself into the work, discovering a strength and decisiveness she never knew she possessed. She rehired some of the old kitchen staff who had been quietly decent to her and fired the ones who had emulated Davies's cruelty. Kenji was true to his word, giving her complete control, yet his presence was a constant, supportive undercurrent. He would appear with coffee in the mornings or sit silently in a corner booth while she interviewed potential new hires, his quiet observation giving her a strange sense of confidence. He learned about Sam's love for dinosaurs, her exhaustion, her small, deferred dreams. She learned that he preferred green tea, that he listened more than he spoke, and that a small, wry smile would sometimes touch his lips when he thought she wasn't looking. The line between employer and something else began to blur into a soft, hazy gray. One evening, after a long day of planning menus, Chloe was preparing to leave when Kenji stopped her. "I have not yet properly thanked you for my birthday gift," he said. He led her not out of the restaurant, but up a flight of stairs she hadn't known existed, to a small rooftop garden overlooking the city lights. A simple table was set for two, and the air was filled with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. He had arranged for a private meal, cooked by the new head chef she had just hired. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the city sparkling beneath them. "Tell me about Sam," he said, his voice soft in the darkness. And she did. She talked about his infectious laugh, his stubborn streak, the way he drew dinosaurs on every spare piece of paper. She spoke of the fierce, all-consuming love she had for him, and the constant fear that she wasn't providing enough. Kenji listened, his attention absolute. He didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. He just listened, making her feel heard in a way she hadn't realized she was missing. "You are a good mother," he said finally. "You are teaching him honor. Not with words, but with your actions." The compliment was so simple, so direct, it struck her to the core. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling that was dangerously close to affection. As the evening wound down, a cool breeze swept across the rooftop. Chloe shivered slightly. Without a word, Kenji stood and removed his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. The fabric was warm and smelled of him, sandalwood and something clean, like fresh rain. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck, and a jolt, sharp and sweet, shot through her. She turned her head, her face tilted up toward his. He was closer than she had realized. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes, and in them, she no longer saw a fearsome Yakuza boss. She saw a man, lonely and guarded, who was slowly, cautiously, letting her in. He leaned down, his movement deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers, tentatively at first, a soft, questioning pressure. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of discovery. It tasted of green tea and quiet strength and a profound, shared loneliness. It was a promise of a new kind of safety, a new kind of home. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. "Chloe," he whispered, as if the name itself was a revelation. In that moment, surrounded by the glittering, indifferent city, Chloe knew her life had been irrevocably changed by a cupcake, and that the man who had bought a restaurant to save her dignity might just end up saving her heart, too. The danger of his world still lingered at the edges of her awareness, a faint, cold shadow. But for the first time, she felt brave enough to face it, as long as he was standing there with her. The grand reopening of the restaurant, now renamed Sanctuary, was a quiet success. It was no longer a gilded cage for the elite, but a warm, welcoming space. Chloe, in a simple, elegant black dress Kenji had insisted on buying for her, moved through the room with a newfound confidence, a quiet authority that commanded respect. He watched her from his usual corner booth, a silent guardian. Their relationship had settled into a gentle rhythm. The stolen moments on the rooftop, the shared cups of tea, the soft, questioning kisses had become a part of their daily existence. He had never been to her apartment again, respecting a boundary he seemed to understand without her needing to speak it, but he made sure her world was secure. Her rent was paid for the next year, a signing bonus he had called it, and a trust fund had been quietly established for Sam's education. These were not the actions of a mere employer. They were the acts of a protector, a man weaving a net of safety around her. But the shadows of his other life were always there. One night, as she was leaving, she saw him speaking in low, urgent tones with a stern-faced man in a dark suit. The man handed Kenji a small, white envelope before bowing and disappearing into the night. Kenji's entire demeanor had changed. The softness he showed her was gone, replaced by the cold, hard stillness she had seen that first night. He saw her watching, and his expression immediately softened, but she had glimpsed the mask slip. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice laced with a concern that was now second nature. He tucked the envelope into his pocket. "It is a business matter. Nothing for you to worry about," but she did worry. She knew his business was not in spreadsheets and quarterly reports. His business was in whispers and shadows, in debts of honor and violence. That night, he insisted on driving her home himself. The silence in the car was different, not comfortable, but taut with unspoken tension. When they arrived at her building, he turned off the engine. "Chloe," he began, his voice heavy. "My world, it is not a safe place. By being close to me, you're close to it." "I know," she said quietly. He looked at her, surprised by her simple acceptance. "A rival family is becoming aggressive. They see my recent activities, this restaurant, the time I spend here, as a sign of weakness. They sent a message." He didn't elaborate, but she could guess the nature of it. "A threat. A warning." "They are mistaken," he continued, his voice hardening. "I am not weak. I am, for the first time, strong in a way I did not know was possible. Because I have something to protect." He reached across the console, his hand gently cupping her jaw. His thumb stroked her cheek. "But I will not have you or your son be endangered by my choices. If you wish to walk away, I will understand. I will ensure you are provided for. You will never have to see me again." He was offering her an out. A return to a normal, safe life, free from the dark gravity of his world. She could take it. She could go back to worrying about rent and shoes, but they would be normal worries, free from the threat of faceless, violent men. She looked into his eyes, into the deep, lonely pools that had first captured her empathy, and saw the fear there. Not for himself, but for her. And in that moment, her own fear vanished, replaced by a fierce, unshakable certainty. "No," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I'm not going anywhere." A flicker of disbelief, then a wave of profound relief washed over his features. He leaned in and kissed her, and this time, it was not tentative or questioning. It was a kiss of desperation and gratitude, a sealing of a pact. It was a kiss that said they were in this together, for better or for worse. The city lights outside seemed to dim, leaving them in the intimate bubble of the car, two disparate souls from different worlds, clinging to each other as they chose to build a new one together, whatever the cost.